1 minute till start time. If my virtual presenters could please go ahead and turn on your cameras, please. Mr. Mayor, we're ready.
Good evening. Welcome to City of Sugar Land City Council meeting for Tuesday, June the 15th. A little bit about our agenda tonight. In a minute, our council member Jennifer Lane is going to do the invocation. That'll be followed by the pledge. Following that, we have two very special recognitions to accomplished young ladies, and we'll do those recognitions before we take up the council business. At this time, Jen, would you lead us in the invocation, please?
Thank you, Mayor. If everyone could join me in prayer. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to gather together today in freedom to discuss the business of our local government and pray openly over our great city. I ask you to cast a hedge of protection over our local community leaders and their families, also for our City of Sugar Land employees that work tirelessly to keep our city moving and safe. We lift up all of our local leaders. We ask you to provide them with wisdom and right judgment to make the best decisions to move us forward in a way that's pleasing to you. We are mindful and thankful for those from our past, those with strong hearts and strong hands that contributed to building the foundation of our great city. We have hope that we can continue to carry out that vision. We pray for our mayors, city councils, city commissioners, police chiefs, firefighters, medical and public works professionals, and all who serve our local communities. Strengthen them with wisdom and grace for every heavy burden they carry. May they manage their teams and projects with love. Keep their hearts pure and their eyes turned towards you, Lord, as they work in the best interest of the people they are called to serve. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. We've got some very special guests that I'd like to recognize tonight. We're going to start with Lemonade Day 2021, and I'm going to ask, I'll do that. I'm going to ask Bailey Kinney if the Lemonade Day Houston Executive Director to please come up, Sabrina Rossler. The 2020 Lemonade Day Houston Youth Entrepreneur of the Year, and Jenny Rosser, Sabrina's mom. Could you come on right up here? And then I think I'm going to ask you to open it for us.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Do I look this way or this way?
You can look this way. The camera's right there.
Okay. Hello, everyone. As he said, my name is Bailey Kinney, and I'm the Executive Director of Lemonade Day Houston. Very proud to be here tonight, and we appreciate your time so much. I just want to tell you a little about what Lemonade Day is. We are a nonprofit organization that started in 2007 by an entrepreneur named Michael Holthouse. So we are now national, and we have impacted over 1 million children over these 14 years. The mission of Lemonade Day is to ignite a spark for every young child to become an entrepreneur. We, through this, it is a curriculum-based program that is taught to children through youth organizations, households, schools, and they are able to open and operate and own their own business at a young age. It is a fabulous curriculum that's exciting because it's a lemonade stand and it's attractive to most children, especially in hot Sugarland, Texas. And so they learn to set a goal, make a plan, work the plan really hard, and achieve their dreams. And we are so excited and proud to announce that Lemonade Day in Sugarland, Texas this summer is going to be July 17th. Thank you for this, Sugarland. We appreciate all your support in this announcement today. And we are encouraging everyone to get out and support these youth entrepreneurs. It is easy to register on our website, lemonadeday.org, Houston. You could register your youth. You can become a mentor. You can be a volunteer. And you can change a child's life forever. These children are acquiring skills that are lifelong skills that they'll take into their career for the rest of their life. Problem solving, teamwork, financial literacy, business literacy, customer service, and all these skills are not being taught in school at young ages. I'm also so proud tonight to introduce Sabrina Rossler. Sabrina is the perfect example. We are so proud of her. Sugarland, Texas, Sabrina. And she has won the Youth Entrepreneur Award in 2020. And she is now here to talk to us about her experience and how she runs her own business, Fresh and Juicy. So again, thank you for your support. I encourage all the council members, get your families and friends to volunteer and participate in this program and get more kids involved, and let's paint the town yellow on July 17th. I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Sabrina. I'm 10 years old, and I have been with the program for about 3 years. I started when I was 7 in 2018 with the program, and my mom and my dad made me a stand because I love to play store. A year later, my mom, she signed me up for the program, and I thought it'd be fun because, well, it was with a lemonade stand and I'd be selling lemonade. With the program, I didn't just learn how to have my own lemonade stand. I learned things that my mom didn't learn till college. I think the program is great for kids, and it teaches them not only to run their first business, but it teaches them to save, share, and spend. These helped me a lot when I was with my business, and I can't wait for other kids to start with the program, and I can't wait to keep on going with the program. Thank you.
And just to say goodbye and thank you very much to the mayor and all the council members for this recognition. We also thank the program Lemonade Day Houston every single day because we were growing with the program. And as she said, she learned a few things that I didn't get to learn until later. And now she's running and operating her own business, Fresh and Juicy. Thank you.
Pretty extraordinary when you think about it. We have a certificate of recognition in the office of the mayor presented to Panino and Partners Lemonade Day. Certificate of recognition is for Lemonade Day, which has been set for July the 17th for Houston, Sugarland, and surrounding cities in the area. Lemonade Day would like to engage support from the city of Sugarland in registering as many kids as possible for this free program. Established in 2017 in Houston, Lemonade Day teaches the basics of entrepreneurial training, mentoring guide participants through a series of youth entrepreneurship development lessons via My Lemonade Day app or workbooks. In Lemonade Day, participants keep the money they earn after paying back their investors and are encouraged to spend some, save some, and share some of their profits with a cause that matters to them. Lemonade Day has expanded to 84 licensed markets in 31 states, Puerto Rico, Canada, and Bermuda, along with 6 military bases, U.S. military bases. More than 1 million children and thousands of adult mentors have participated in Lemonade Day since 2007. And I want to present this certificate of recognition to you all. And certainly when you have someone as young as you that can learn. I started my first company when I was 21. You're a lot younger than I am, or than I was. So you're really off to a good start. And I learned most of my life lessons long before I got my college degree. So I understand what your mom's saying. So thank you all very much. And thank you, young lady, for coming out tonight. Council members, we're going to do a picture if I could get y'all down here.
All right, perfect. Everyone looking right here, please. We're going to take a couple. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3.
And then can I get one for the Fort Bend Herald? Can you squeeze in a little bit? Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Also, if you want to check me out, go to freshandjuicy.us.
There we go. And now our next recognition is for a young lady, not quite that young, but nonetheless, this is pretty extraordinary when I read the background. This is a certificate of recognition. This is for Sarah Sitar, who has been awarded the Teacher of the Year. And she was among 500 contestants. This is your first year of teaching. And she won the award in her first year, which I think says a little bit about your drive, your personality, and I think you have some other people that you want to recognize that were mentors. So at this time, I'm going to ask Layla Sitar to come down, please. That's her mom, and she's an educator. Carolyn Sabahi, and she's Sarah's mentor. And of course, Sarah herself. Sarah? And who wants to start? Sarah, would you like to start?
Thank you everyone for coming here today. I would like to start with first thanking Mayor Zimmerman for giving me this opportunity, and Mr. Kermali, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Along with that, I would like to say thank you to my family, and I would like to say thank you to my friends and my community, Mom and Dad. You guys really helped me out. My grandma, my uncle, my aunt, my cousins, the community as a whole. So I really wanted to, thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for being there for me. And this was my first year of teaching, and it wasn't an easy one, but I have to say that you guys made it easier for me, and I don't think I could have done it without you guys. So thank you so much.
What did you teach? What grade?
I teach math and science, 5th grade.
5th grade?
Yes.
I bet that was a challenge.
Yes. It was, but you know what? Every challenge is an experience. So, I enjoyed every part of it. Thank you. Would like to.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Sabahi. I had the honor and privilege of working with Sarah not only as a teammate but as her mentor this year. Let me tell you, Sarah is already impressive on paper. She already has an accomplished resume. But what is even more impressive is working with her this past year. I cannot tell you the way that Sarah handled the challenges that she faced, not only as a first-year teacher, because that's challenging in and of itself, but she taught her first year in a pandemic. And the way she handled every hurdle and obstacle that came her way was unbelievable. It was with style, grace, and with a smile. She found a way to learn new curriculum, reach children through a screen, welcome them back onto campus. She lost and gained new students every 9 weeks, and she did it all, flawlessly. So I'm here to tell you that every accolade and accomplishment and award that is being bestowed upon Sarah, I can personally tell you that it is more than well deserved. I know that she has a very bright future ahead of her. I'm excited to see where she will go and what all she has ahead of her. I'm just honored to be here to help celebrate Sarah this evening. So thank you all for the recognition for Sarah. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sarah's mom, Layla Sutar, and I would like to go ahead and start by thanking the City of Sugar Land, of course, the mayor for giving this opportunity, and Mr. Karmali for letting Sarah be here tonight. Not to say we come from generations of teachers. My mom was a teacher. I am a teacher. Sarah chose to be a teacher. I have aunts in the family that are teachers. I think Sarah has done an absolute great job. I have to say this was not an easy year with COVID. I can definitely agree to that. With ups and downs, teaching children virtually and in person, and with everything else, and then with her just, completing her master's in the same year, passing 3 state exams, and accomplishing the year of COVID. So I'm really proud of Sarah, but as a teacher, I'm going to say that the learning process never ends. So as educators, we have a lot more to challenge and a lot more to learn. So Sarah, you got a long way to go. Keep going. And once again, thank you for everyone that made this time to come out. Thank you for everyone that's joined us on Zoom. Thanks family, thanks friends, because without your blessings, this would have not been possible. So thank you.
Before I read the certificate of recognition, we as a community, we as a city, we as a state, we as a nation, don't thank our teachers enough for the sacrifices that you all make. And for, the most important thing for anybody is our children. And we charge you with educating our children. They're with you all during the school year more than they're with us as parents. So I want to make sure that each of you that are teachers, how much we appreciate you. And it doesn't get said enough, and we certainly don't pay you enough. So, thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do with our children. Our community can only be this community as long as we have great school districts and we educate our children. So let me read the certificate of recognition. Presented to Sarah Sitar, 2021 Texas Teacher of the Year. Texas Teacher of the Year. The certificate of recognition is for Fort Bend Independent School District elementary school teacher Sarah Sitar as the Texas Teachers of Tomorrow 2021 Texas Teacher of the Year. Ms. Sitar was hired in 2020 as part of a state of Texas COVID-19 waiver that allowed school districts to employ alternative certification programs candidates who had not yet completed their teaching program requirements. Sarah experienced her first year of teaching, completed an ACP program, passed her Texas examinations of educator standards exams, while also dealing with the challenges of the pandemic. And I think what's not in here is you also got your master's degree. So each year, teachers are nominated by colleagues and principals for the title of Texas Teacher of the Year. Sarah was nominated by Sienna Crossing Elementary Principal Rachel Rossier and chosen from more than 500 candidates. Her devotion to work, paired with a flawlessly optimistic outlook, truly makes her excel as a teacher. She gives every child her very best effort each day while instilling a love for learning. And we want to present you with this certificate. And council members, if we could get the immediate, we're going to do this a couple ways. We're going to get the immediate family first, and then we're going to get friends and the extended family. And then we're going to get council members home. So if we could get the family up front and council members.
I'm not sure.
Step back.
Yes, I think so.
We shy away. You follow it. Yeah.
You definitely,
I'll be the one that has it straight up.
you definitely gave me
All right, great. Everyone looking right here, please. All right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Last one. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next up.
I think we've got some other people in the audience. If you all can come down, please. Come on, we'll get you all stacked up around the council. And other cousins we got. Rowan, we got to get back.
I won't be able to see if you kneel down there. I won't be able to see you down there. No. Yeah, I think I can make out everyone's head luckily, so just if everyone can see me, make sure if you can't see me, I can't see you, the camera can't see you. All right, we're going to take a couple. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Last one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, I think we're going to start.
Rowan, let's get a picture of the two of them. We got
Sure thing. Yep. Perfect. All right. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Last one. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
future's pretty bright when we have people, young ladies like that in our community. We've also got a couple of scouts in the audience. If I could ask you all to please stand and tell us your name, your troop, and what badge you're working on. He said, I'm not going.
Hello, I'm William Brown, and this is my little brother Owen. We are currently working on the Communications Merit Badge.
Okay.
Currently requirement 5. Yes, requirement 5.
Okay.
Sorry, what was the other thing?
Your troop number.
Oh, troop number 1002, from Richmond, Texas.
Okay. Well, thank y'all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thomas, we're going to move on to item number 2, public comment. Do we have anybody signed up?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We're going to move now on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is going to be taken as one motion unless a council member wants to pull an item, at which time we'll consider that item separately after a brief presentation with staff. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
We're going to pull item B, and we'll have a separate presentation for that. So we're going to take item A, C, and D as one motion. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve, Mayor.
Got a motion by Kermali. Do I have a second? I didn't catch it. Councilmember McCutcheon. Thank you, Carol. Your vote this time, please. And it passes 7-0. Thank you, council members. Now we're going to ask for item number B. Let me read it. Second consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land Ordinance number 2236, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sugar Land, Texas, establishing a generator rebate program. We have Lisa Kosich-Meyer, our Director of Planning and Development Services. Lisa?
Lisa, if you'll turn on your camera and unmute your mic, please.
Lisa's in the virtual world.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Lisa.
We can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I cannot turn on my video, but I am here and happy to answer any questions you have.
William?
Thank you, Mayor. I am so excited about this program because it's so unique, not only in our immediate area, but everywhere outside of this area. So, Lisa, my question is this. Could you explain how our citizens can take advantage of this? I understand the dates are from February through November, or a portion of November. I've already had several people contact me about the details. I have asked them to contact the city should this pass, and everyone's really excited about it. So I think if you can talk just for a moment about the program, I think I will just send this to them.
Absolutely. We will be posting more information online, but an application will be available, and it is intended to collect pertinent information that will be used in giving the rebate, but essentially homeowners through between February 15th and November 30th will need to have applied and received approval of their necessary permits, completed the installation of the generator, and have satisfied all of the necessary city inspections for that generator installation, and then submit an application and with some needed information, and we will be processing their request.
Okay, fabulous. So if I may, one more, Mayor.
Go ahead.
So this is my understanding, Lisa. We have a homeowner, for example, wants a whole home generator in their home due to the winter storm that we recently suffered in February to March. And they approach you through contact, and they can get up to, correct me if I'm wrong, $650 rebated should they go through the steps to get this done correctly. At the end, they could get up to $650 rebated. Is that correct?
The amount is a little bit more. It's roughly about $624 in city permit fees that they would be eligible to receive.
Well, Lisa, thank you for your forward thinking along with the city that made this happen, because this is going to help our community. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
No further, Mayor.
Do I have a motion?
I motion to approve.
Got a motion by Ferguson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Kermali. If you will, at this time, please. There we go. We got a 7-0 vote. Thank you, council members. Item number 4, contracts and agreements. 4A, consideration of an action on authorization of a contract with C3 Constructors LLC in the amount of $1,900,000 for the groundwater plant rehabilitation project CIP CWA 2004. We have Ross Woodfin, our senior project manager, and Timothy John, our assistant city engineer. Welcome, gentlemen. I think you're virtual.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A little bit of background on the project. The groundwater plant rehabilitation is an annual project within the CIP to provide for maintenance improvements and expansion of the city's 12 groundwater plants. Annual improvements are based on the groundwater plant asset management model. The engineering design for this project was completed in March. Next slide, please. We'll be doing work at 7 different groundwater plants. Top left, you have Thompson Chapel, going clockwise, homeward way. Then you have First Colony and Greatwood East, Greatwood West, River Park, and New Territory. Next slide, please. Project scope at the River Park plant includes sandblast and recoat both hydropneumatic tanks and replace the 2 existing water meters on the distribution line. At the Thompson Chapel, Homeward Way, New Territory, Greatwood East, and Greatwood West water plants will be installing a chlorine gas scrubber, electrical modifications, and 2 distribution meters. At the First Colony plant, which was an alternate bid item, we'll be replacing the existing asphalt driveway to the plant. Next slide, please. The bid advertised in April, and we opened bids May 13th. The engineer's estimate was $1.7 million. We had 2 bids, and the low bid was C3 Constructors with a total bid of $1,900,000. Next slide, please. The project funding, we have available budget of $2,759,048. The construction contract at $1,900,000 will need a 5% contingency of $100,000, leaving a balance of $759,048. And the remaining balance will go to fund the phase 2 of the WA 2004, which is currently under design. Next slide, please. With the schedule, we'll be issuing notice to proceed in June. The construction duration is 300 calendar days, looking for a completion of April of next year. Next slide, please. We don't anticipate any construction impacts. All the work is inside the plants, inside the fences. If we do run across situations where we have to notify people, we'll do that. Next slide, please. The staff recommends approval of a construction contract in a total bid amount of $1,900,000 with C3 Constructors for the groundwater plant rehab project CIP WA 2004. Next, please. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Ross. Council members, questions? Carol?
Thank you, Mayor. Has the city used C3 Constructors before?
No, ma'am, we have not. However, our consultant has, and they gave a good recommendation.
Okay, great. Where are they based?
Out of Willis, just outside of Conroe.
Okay, very good. A motion to approve.
Got a motion by McCutcheon. Do I have a second? Second. Got a second by Lane. Your vote at this time, please. And we have a 7-0 vote. Thank you, council members.
Thank you.
4B, consideration of and action on ratification of expenditures with Sprint Landfill in the amount of $149,388, and authorization of a budget amendment in the amount of $294,290 from the solid waste fund balance for increased debris collection and disposal. We have tonight Stacy Henderson, our Director of Environmental and Neighborhood Services. Stacy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, before we get started, I wanted to provide a little bit of background. As you may recall, Winter Storm Uri moved across the region the week of February 15th, and our schedule of services was modified at this time to ensure the safety remained a priority and the residents received services. So at that time, Thursday and Friday garbage collection was rolled to Friday and Saturday. Green waste and recycling collections were canceled for the week, and the third Monday bulk waste collection that week was rescheduled. Next slide, please. Following Winter Storm Uri, staff activated the emergency resources provision of the Republic Services contract, which addresses the collection and disposal of an increased volume of material resulting from a state of emergency, and requires the allocation of additional resources for the collection of those materials. Next slide, please. Our initial focus was placed on the addition of extra bulk waste collections in order to address home damages. The accepted bulk waste items were temporarily expanded to include construction and demolition debris, and 2 rounds of bulk waste collections were scheduled for all residents over the course of 3 weeks. Next slide. Green waste collection was suspended for 2 weeks in order to focus on the collection of garbage, recycling, and bulk waste. Collection delays were experienced across the city when green waste collection resumed the week of March 1st. And despite working 6 days a week, Republic Services was unable to complete the weekly green waste and bulk waste collection due to the volume of material. Next slide, please. So a transfer location was opened at the prison property on March 9th to allow the continued removal of green waste and facilitate quicker turnaround times due to the increased wait times that were being seen at the landfill. City staff was utilized to operate the transfer location and facilitate the loading of roll-off containers for the transport and disposal of the landfill, and portable restroom facilities were utilized on site for the city staff. Even with the transfer location, service delays continued, and the volume of material out for collection remained continuous across the city. Next slide, please. At that time, staff executed an emergency contract with Crowder Gulf in an amount not to exceed $350,000 for debris collection and removal services. Collection operations were conducted by Crowder Gulf from Friday, March 12th through Wednesday, March 24th. Initially, for a very short period of time, all material collected by Crowder Gulf was hauled to Blue Ridge landfill for final disposal. However, with the distance of this landfill from Sugar Land and the increased volume, the increased wait times, staff directed Crowder Gulf to haul material to Sprint landfill. Next slide, please. Once Crowder Gulf completed their collection and disposal efforts, they continued to haul material from the prison property to the landfill. So their total operations concluded on April 21st. So the cost for Crowder Gulf's debris and collection and removal service was $331,800. That covered their actual collection and removal service. During the debris removal operation, when they hauled the material to Sprint landfill, we need to pay the $149,388 in disposal costs for that material hauled by Crowder Gulf. Next slide, please. Now, looking at the Republic Services contract, the emergency resources provision, if volumes collected exceed 120% of the average volumes in previous months of the contract that correspond to that month of the emergency, then the city will reimburse for the additional direct disposal and operational costs above that average. Next slide, please. So in looking at the services that were provided, the operational breakdown was in disposal cost of the material, hauls from the prison property by both Republic and the third-party hauler that they had brought in to assist, portable restrooms that were brought out to the property for staff utilization, additional hours that were worked by Republic Services staff on Wednesdays and Saturdays, as those are not normal collection days. And then the short period of time that Crowder hauled material to Blue Ridge landfill. Next slide, please. So in looking at these costs of service, the initial invoice provided by Republic Services for these services was $284,526.39. And each one of these items is broken down, but we're going to go into more detail in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. Now, in reviewing this information, the considerations that we looked at were the total tons of solid waste, including bulk and grain waste, for the months of February, March, and April, for 2019, 2020, and 2021. We looked at the average monthly collection volumes for 2019 and 2020. Looked at 120% of those average monthly collection volumes to determine if that as the threshold was met to require reimbursement by the city. And then comparing those 2021 volumes to the amount above average to determine what the city's responsibility was. Next slide, please. As you'll see in the next 3 slides, we looked at each month individually. For the February analysis, you see here the average collection volume for 2019 and 2020, what 120% of that average collection volume is. And then looking at the volume collected in 2021 in February, you'll note on this slide that we did not meet that 120% threshold. And so we did not have a responsibility for, February expenditures. Next slide, please. And looking at March, again, you see here the average collection volume for the March timeframe, the 120% of that average collection volume, and then looking at the volume collected in 2021, you see that we did meet that 120% threshold, and it is about 25.8% above the average volume, which is 1,066 tons approximately. Next slide, please. In the April analysis, the average collection volume, we did look at the volume collected in 2021, we did meet the 120% threshold, and that threshold was about, or the volume collected in 2021 was about 50.36% above average at 1,465 tons. Next slide, please. So when you look at the volumes for March and April, based on those percentages, you add them up, it's a little over 2,500 tons at $32.50 a ton for disposal cost. The total cost would be $82,294.23. Next slide, please. In taking those same percentages and extrapolating them across the rest of the expenditures, looking here on the slide at the hauls from the prison property conducted by Republic Services, that was conducted during March. In looking at the total for the March hauls, the city's responsibility again is that 25.8%, which equated to $7,412.34. Next slide, please. In looking at the third-party contractors' hauls that were made from the prison property, their hauls were made from March 15th to April 18th. And looking again at that March time period, 25.8% of that March total is $8,848.76. Next slide, please. For April, on those third-party contractor hauls, again, that 50.36% that we had shared with you earlier, the city responsibility equates to $15,431.56. In adding the March and April expenditures for the third-party contractor hauls, it totaled $24,280. Next slide, please. In looking at the additional hours for the Wednesday and Saturday collections, the collection dates ran from February to April. As you recall, February, the collection volumes did not warrant charges. In March, again, that 25.8% above average equated to $15,270 for the month of March. Next slide, please. For April, that 50.36% of the total for the extra hours was $11,839.91. And adding up March and April, it was $27,110.55. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, there was a period of just a few days where Crowder Gulf actually hauled material directly to Blue Ridge. That entire cost would be the city's responsibility of $2,891.60. Next slide, please. And as I also mentioned previously, we did bring portable restrooms out to the facility at that cost of $912.99. Next slide, please. Now, in adding all of these up, the total for the additional services equates to $144,902.03. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the total debris removal costs. As you'll see, the top is what has already been paid to Crowder Gulf for their services. The Sprint landfill item and the Republic Services items that are on the agenda tonight for the ratification of the Sprint landfill items and the budget amendment for both Sprint and Republic Services. We also spent a little over $17,000 on some equipment rental that was utilized at the prison property, which was addressed in our solid waste O&M budget. So in total, for debris removal costs, it was about $643,914.28. The solid waste fund balance as of June 14th yesterday equated to $455,055. After tonight's budget amendment, the fund balance would be $160,764. This information has been reviewed with the Finance Audit Committee previously this month. Next slide, please. And tonight, we are recommending ratification of expenditures with Sprint landfill in the amount of $149,388 and authorization of a budget amendment in the amount of $294,290 from the solid waste fund balance for debris collection and disposal. Next slide, please. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Stacy. Questions? William?
Hey, Stacy, thank you for all the numbers. That helps a lot. I want to begin by, Mike is up here. Mike, thanks for your hard work on this and leading the city through a very difficult time for our city with the waste. I have just really elementary questions. I see on there Sprint landfill and Blue Ridge landfill mentioned. I'm not familiar with Blue Ridge. Please explain to me why the Blue Ridge bill is so low. It's probably a volume issue as opposed to the Sprint bill being so high. I'm not familiar with the Blue Ridge at all.
Blue Ridge is typically where our material is taken, and that's where we initially started. But as you could see in the PowerPoint, we only took it there for about 3 or 4 days because we were experiencing longer turnaround times in trying to get the trucks back on the roads. So at that point, we directed the trucks to Sprint landfill.
So for the people, just one follow-up, Mayor. For the people that are not familiar with the process that happened, and you went through it rather quickly, the reason we use the TDC property is because that is a property that we currently manage, correct? The city?
We own it.
We own it. It's land that we own, so it made it a little simpler for the trucks to come and go there as opposed to leaving the waste in the communities. Is that correct?
We opened the prison site as kind of as a transfer location so that the material could be picked up off of the curbs across the city and it can be dropped off there, and so that the trucks could get back onto the roads much quicker and into the neighborhoods to collect more material.
We shortened the turnaround time.
Right. Okay, that's fabulous. Just for people that have never watched and they're sitting here just like me going, wow, that's a lot of trash. And why would we be at TDC? So you've answered all these very good questions. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else? I'll make the motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I've got a second by Lane. You vote at this time, please. It passes 7-0. Thank you, council members. Item number 5, ordinances and resolutions. 5A, first and final consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land ordinance number 2234. Ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Sugar Land, Texas Waterworks and Sewer System Revenue and Refunding Bond Series 2021, authorizing the refunding of certain outstanding obligations and certain other procedures and provisions related thereto. We have with us our own Jennifer Brown, Director of Finance. Jennifer.
Good evening. Today we were out in the bond market, and it was a good day to be out in the bond market because I have some very good news to share with you. So we did 2 issues today. The first is our water and sewer revenue and refunding bonds. Our water and sewer revenue bonds fund our utility-related capital projects in the fiscal year 21 CIP. And that includes our strategies and projects that were recommended from the Integrated Water Resources Plan. Issuing debt to fund these projects allows us to spread our project costs over the useful life of the assets and helps us to manage our utility rates. The refunding that's included in this issue is the direct benefit to our utility customers, as the utility fund is the beneficiary of the savings that is generated from this refunding. These bonds are not supported by property taxes. They're funded and supported solely from utility charges for services. And this issue and all revenue bonds carry their own bond rating. Next slide. So our financial management policy statements provide guidelines for us on consideration of refunding bonds. And so throughout the year, as market conditions change and different maturities are coming up, our bond counsel, or rather our financial advisor, I don't think our bond counsel wants to monitor the market, our financial advisor monitors the market for refunding opportunities and brings those to our attention. Our goal in refunding is to maintain the same maturity structure as our old debt, and the cost of the bond issue is factored into the analysis to determine if the refunding generates a sufficient net present value savings. Our minimum net present value savings is 3% of refunded principal. Most of our bond sales are conducted on a competitive bid process, unless the structure of the issue warrants a negotiated transaction. And now that we can't do advanced refundings, which is really the one condition that warranted a negotiated transaction, just about every issue that we do is bid on a competitive basis. Next slide. So we have 2 issues that are being considered for refunding with this issue. They are both a Series 2012 issue. One is the 2012A that had $2.62 million in outstanding principal maturing between 2022 and 2030. And the second is the 2012 water and sewer that had $13.77 million maturing between 22 and 31. So we've been monitoring the market for a couple of months, and I updated this as of the June 1st market conditions. And I did review with the Finance Audit Committee the recommendation based on April market conditions, and so as of the beginning of June, we were looking at about 10.6% net present value savings, and that would compare to the minimum net present value of 3% savings in our policy. And we estimated about $1.74 million in debt service savings out of these 2 issues over a 10-year period. Next slide. So, Council, as in the previous actions that you've had relative to this bond issue, or actually relative to the capital projects in this bond issue, you have taken action twice in September. You approved the fiscal year 21 budget and CIP, as well as an intent to reimburse resolution. This resolution was key because it allowed us to move forward with construction on projects prior to issuing the bonds. We're 9 months into fiscal year 21. We wanted to allow progress to go ahead and go forward on the construction, and we wanted to monitor the bond market and get in later in the year to ensure that we were getting the best possible interest rates. Next slide. So we have 11,477,500 in projects that are funded from the revenue bond issue. They are divided between water, wastewater, and surface water, and those are all as approved in the fiscal year 21 budget and CIP. Next slide. As part of this process, we held ratings calls with Standard & Poor's and Fitch Investor Service. Pleased to report that both rating agencies assigned their AA rating. AAA is the next one. AA rating with a stable outlook to the revenue bonds. Their commentary in their release recognized the quality of the city's financial management and also recognized the progress that has been made by the city toward increasing the all-in coverage ratio with the fiscal year 20 results and results as well as the 20 and 21 rate increases that were approved by City Council. They also recognized our plan for what we call the 10-10-10 plan, which is the remaining increases. So we've implemented the first year of that plan and fiscal year 22 and 23, moving forward with another $10 a month increase to the average residential utility bill. They were pleased with that plan and that helped us to get the stable outlook on that rate. Next slide, please. This proposed issue was reviewed with the Finance Audit Committee on June 3rd at their regular meeting. And so this morning we had competitive bids due at 10:15 this morning. And upon closing of the bonds, upon completion, will be delivered on July 19th of this year. Next slide. So we had quite a bit of interest in the bonds from the market today. We received 5 bids on this issue, and the sale is awarded based on the lowest true interest cost basis. And so we're very, very pleased with the rates on this. We had bids that ranged from 1.3147% to 1.3656%. And so the low bid obviously was the 1.3147, and it goes out from Citibank. And our cover bid was from Raymond James, right? Yes, Raymond James was the cover. And our net present value savings on the refunding was 10.737%. So it actually got a little bit better from what we had seen earlier in the month. And on a gross debt service savings, just comparing actual raw debt service before and after, you're saving around $190,000 a year over the next 10 years on this issue. And that's savings that goes directly to the utility fund. Next slide, please. So with that, I would like to recommend Council approve first and final reading of ordinance number 2234, authorizing the issuance of the Water and Sewer System Revenue and Refunding Bonds Series 2021. There are a bunch of documents for you, Mayor, to sign after this is approved. And we'll have those bonds delivered and get those projects, continue those projects underway. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do also want to recognize Tom Sage with Andrews Curve and Joe Morrow from Hilltop Securities that are on the call representing our financial advisor and bond counsel.
Jennifer, what was the actual interest rate on the bonds?
So this one, the true interest cost was a 1.31%. The actual average coupon on this issue came out a little bit over 4%, 4.07% in total.
Which again saves us a little over 10, almost 11%, net present value, over time. Pretty extraordinary.
So the markets are looking a little strange right now. These bonds were sold at a premium, so that is why the true interest cost is so much lower than the average coupon. These bonds are carrying 5% coupons, in the early years, and then those drop down to a 2% coupon in the latter 3%, and then 2% toward the end of the maturity schedule. So it's a bit of an odd structure that we've not really seen, but that is what the market is asking for. These were priced at a premium and sold at a premium, and so that is how you buy down the true interest cost from the coupon rates.
Questions, Jennifer Stewart?
Thank you, Mayor. As a member of the Finance and Audit Committee, this is an absolute slam dunk for our utility customers, so I move to approve.
Got a motion by Jacobson. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Ferguson. Go ahead at this time, please. And it passed 7-0. Thank you, Jennifer. Item number 5B, first and final consideration of an action on City of Sugar Land ordinance number 2235, ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Sugar Land, Texas general obligation refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2021, authorizing the refunding of certain outstanding obligations and certain other procedures and provisions relating thereto. Back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, so then at 10:45 this morning, we were back out in the market for our GO bond. This is also a GO, and it also included a refunding component, though it was not as big of a refunding for the GO bond as our revenue bond. Our GO bonds carry the AAA rating, which is the highest bond rating available. That bond rating allows the city to access the lowest available rates for bonds in the market. Again, here we are monitoring the markets for savings opportunities, and that allows us to refinance our outstanding debt to achieve interest savings. This is very similar to refinancing a mortgage, where we have probably a little more restriction on refinancing bonds. We have a call provision that allows us to redeem the bonds at any time after the call date, and what we do is issue the bonds at a lower interest rate or interest cost, and then use the proceeds from the new money to pay off the old bonds, and then we pay the lower interest cost on the new bonds. Next slide. Same as the utility bonds, we had previous council action to approve the 21 budget and CIP, and the projects included in the CIP were also included in the intent to reimburse resolution. This allowed us to move forward with those projects ahead of moving forward with this bond sale. Next slide. Same criteria here for refunding guidelines. We were looking for this again was a competitive bid process, and let's go to the next slide. So the refunding included in this issue, we have the Series 2012A refunding. There are 4 maturities from 2022 to 2025 with a principal of $3.435 million. At the beginning of June, we were looking at a 5.76% true and net present value savings, and total debt service savings of around $208,000, $209,000. Next slide. We're also, as part of this issue, this is the first tranche out of the $90.76 million that was approved by voters in 2019. The total amounts that we're funding to construction out of that is $10,576,000. And we have a focus within this issue primarily on drainage with around $600,000 in streets projects. You may recall that we also funded the design of the Chimney Stone and Austin Park drainage improvements in this year's CIP. Those funds are not included in this issue because we have a loan through the Texas Water Development Board that we'll be bringing back to City Council for approval in July. It will be 0 interest rate, and we cannot beat that on the open bond market. So we decided that was the best way to go for that project. Next slide, please. So these are the projects that are funded from this bond issue. I won't read these to you, but they are the projects that were approved in the 21 CIP. You want to go to the next slide. You can see the majorities The majority of these are very heavy on drainage, and then we have our two streets projects, which are the transportation and mobility studies and our University Boulevard widening associated with the county mobility bonds. Next slide, please. In this case, we also had our discussions with Standard & Poor's and Fitch ratings. They both affirmed our AAA rating with a stable outlook, and that allows us to receive the lowest rates that are available in the market on these bonds. Next slide. We went to the market on this at 10:45. This issue will be delivered on July 15th, and we also discussed this with the Finance Audit Committee at their June 3rd meeting. Next slide, please. We'll get to the results. All right, so we had 4 bids on this issue. We are awarding this based on true interest cost basis ahead of any resizing. And so on this, our bids ranged from 1.5108% to 1.7064%. And the low bid on this was from Bach Financial. And we did realize a net present value savings of 6.25% of the refunded principal on this issue. So it ended up a little bit better than we had thought. And our gross debt service savings is $58,316 a year over the next 4 years. Next slide, please. So we ended up with a total of $233,000 in debt service savings. So that came up. So recommendation is approval of first and final reading of ordinance number 2235, and that will authorize the issuance of our City of Sugar Land GEO refunding and improvement bonds series 2021. These funds will be delivered to the city on July 15th. We will then turn around at the same time the bonds that we're refunding will be held and paid off as part of through the paying agent as part of that transaction. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Question? Michelle?
Just a quick question for either one of the three of you. Bach Financial, never heard of them. No city, right? Are we feeling good with Bach Financial?
Yes. So they are used to be known as the Bank of Oklahoma, and so they have been bought out and are now known as Bach Financial.
Do you have a motion?
Motion to approve, Mayor.
Got a motion by Kermali. Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a second by Lane. Vote at this time, please. And it's a 7-0 vote. Thank you, council members. Moving on now to item number 6, workshop 6A, review of and discussion on the 87th session of the Texas Legislature. We have with us our own Rick Ramirez, Intergovernmental Relations Manager, and Snapper Carr, our lobbyist with focused advocacy. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. So today we're going to do a legislative wrap-up for you after the 87th session of the legislative session. I do have Snapper Carr here. He's with Focused Advocacy. They're our lobbyist over there in Austin. And what I'm going to be doing is I'll be providing an outline of our IGR mission and our guiding principles. I'll go over our legislative program and some of the next steps that you're going to see us doing in the next couple of months. Snapper will give you an in-depth review of the 87th legislative session. Next slide. So IGR's mission statement is to ensure the city's interests are protected and enhanced through active involvement in the legislative process and strong intergovernmental relations. Next slide, please. Now, none of the legislature, members of the legislature in Austin think that they're writing bad bills, but it's our job to ensure that policymakers understand how the city works and understand how any of their legislation may have some unintended consequences. And that's the main job that we do when we go to Austin. Next slide, please. So we have some guiding principles. We want to ensure that we protect our community. We want to advance local control, your ability to be able to make decisions at the local level. We want to oppose preemption from the state and allow us to be able to provide our services in the way that we feel best for our citizens. And we want to oppose any threats to our ability to be able to be responsive to our residents. Next slide. So this is just a diagram on kind of how the legislative cycle works. So on odd numbered years, the legislature meets for 140 days. They start in January and in May. That's a intense 140 days where they try to get as much work as they can done. And then after that is where we're at right now. A special session can be called by the governor at any time and only by the governor. And Snapper will go through what we can expect for special sessions and how many sessions we might be looking at. As we get into the late end of the odd years and starting into the early part of the even years, the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House will enter interim charges. These are charges and subjects that the Speaker or the Lieutenant Governor would like the legislature to focus time on, to study, see what went right or went wrong during the legislative session, and also check back on some of the legislation that was passed the session before to see if there needs to be any tweaks. This is also the time that we start our legislative agenda development. And I'll be going into a little bit of that process as we get into the next slide. And we'll go into the next one right here. So when we develop the legislative agenda, we have a road to being able to adopt the legislative agenda. So we think about, first of all, the community and our business, and understand what legislation can be passed that can impact our ability to be able to serve our residents. The second thing that you see there, Legislative Task Force, is something that we did a little bit differently. So what we did was we had a city manager task force of 7 members who were a city manager task force. And these are members who heard information from our legislative team. Snapper, myself, TML also took part in it. We also had some departments come in as well. And we discussed legislative issues with those members. Those members came from boards and commissions, and they were able to give a citizen perspective on our legislative program. It was just a great experience for us. We learned a lot. They learned a lot. And it helped us as we went into the next part, which is we brought those ideas to the IGR committee, which is a subcommittee of City Council, 3 members. And the IGR committee came up with the legislative agenda based on all of the information that we provided. After that, we'll bring that legislative agenda to City Council, where we'll do a workshop. And then we'll also adopt that agenda both in public meetings. And then we go into the implementation, and that's where the IGR department implements that legislative agenda that you passed on your behalf. We coordinate with City Council as much as we can, get you all involved, and sometimes we bring you to Austin with us. Next slide. So prior to the session beginning, we always have meetings with our legislators. We like to highlight our legislative priorities, and we like to establish the lines of communication between our office and theirs. We do have also partners that we meet with. We meet with other cities throughout the session and before the session and after the session. We meet with the county. We meet with the Texas Municipal League, and we take part in the development of their legislative agenda. We've also met with the realtors, and we've met with the Greater Houston Partnership. There's plenty of other groups that we meet with as well, but those are the ones that I wanted to highlight tonight. We identify common issues, and we identify areas that we can collaborate on as we go into a legislative session. Next slide. I wanted to give you all a little glimpse into how Winter Storm Uri and the loosening of COVID restrictions impacted the legislative session. So before the session, we were kind of under the impression that this was going to be a very boring and a very business-oriented type session. We were going to look at COVID response and recovery. We were going to look at policing, criminal justice reform. That was in response to George Floyd and all of those things that happened the previous summer. And we were also going to look at police funding as well. And city lobbying was also on one of the main topics that we're going to talk about. Post Storm Uri and the loosening of COVID restrictions kind of opened up what the legislature had time to deal with. So there is now ERCOT reform, winter storm response. That became one of the top issues during the legislative session. City lobbying was still up there. Policing and criminal justice reform was not as big of a deal as we thought it was going to be going into the session, but police funding was. And then there were various hot button issues that were able to take up a lot of time during the session. There was abortion and voting reform, permitless carries, all those kind of issues that we didn't think were going to have a ton of time or bandwidth. The legislature ended up having plenty of time to be able to talk about those. Next slide. We also did things a little bit differently this time around. We had virtual advocacy. This is the first time we've had to do something like this, and there were some pros and cons that came along with it, but the COVID restrictions kind of ended our regular office drop-ins. We couldn't just easily go into an office and say, hey, there's a bill that came up or a new language that came out. We want to talk to you. Now we had to rely on being able to schedule meetings with people and had regular meetings. That was one of the good things that came out of it, was that we had regular meetings on Zoom. We were able to meet with department heads and that sort of thing. And so there were some good things that came out of it and practices that we're going to continue to bring with us as we move forward. Also, you couldn't just pop into the Capitol real quick and provide testimony. You had to get there like 30 minutes or an hour early, do your COVID testing at the Capitol. Mayor knows that for sure. And so it just changed. Everything changed with COVID. It was a different session, and Snapper will also go into that. Next slide. So next steps is that we're going to work with staff to implement some of these legislative changes. We are going to be coming back to you, maybe not me, but you're going to be seeing some other departments coming in with ordinance changes, depending on how the legislature affected their ability to serve citizens. We're going to evaluate changes to our plans and our projects, and we'll continue engagement with the legislative offices as much as we can. There is a special session, at least one, that's certain in our near future. And we're going to continue the implementation of our City Council legislative agenda. We're going to identify any additional legislative issues as we go into the next legislative session. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to my esteemed colleague, Snapper Carr, and he's going to give you a wrap up for the legislative session, and he'll bring it back to me, and I'll close it out.
Thank you, Rick. Welcome, Snapper.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Snapper Carr. I'm partner and general counsel with Focused Advocacy, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you tonight. And I've already told the mayor this. I average about a council meeting a week or a work session typically in my professional life. And in January of 2020, as I was leaving El Paso, Texas City Hall, I did not believe that that would be my last one until tonight. And so thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here in person and get to see y'all, and really it is something we enjoy our relationship and ability to work with y'all. We've had a excellent relationship and have been honored to be a part of y'all's team and your staff. This session, as Rick said before we just jump right into some of the dialogue, was unprecedented. I think y'all all knew that. Y'all have lived through the unprecedented times. Many of the physical limitations and kind of looking back on the session and its effect that it's had for those of us that have done this, and it is a very intense, very social, I heard someone describe it as a physical social network at the Capitol, and that is true. A lot of work truly gets done in the halls, in the various corners, and through a lot of informal and formal interactions that were unable to occur, especially in the first 2 months of session, and that had an effect at the end. It had an effect, I think, on the vetting of some legislation, had an effect on the relationships that are formed amongst offices and various trade groups that operate in the Capitol, because as Rick said, we weren't allowed in any normal way. The mayor can attest to it. In his time there, I said it seemed a while back, but setting till almost 4 a.m. in the morning or thereafter to testify on important bills was not the norm. That would always be an exception. I'll tell you, because of the time constraints we had hearings that multiple times. I had over 6 myself that went past 4 a.m. in the morning after beginning at 8 a.m. the day before. And so the effect of that restriction at the first had a big effect at the end too. And it had an effect on the outcomes, I think, as well. The slide that we have here, obviously, is our main state leaders. Certainly the lieutenant governor and the speaker are in the starring roles of session, with the governor playing a very big part, and a very big part right now. Comptroller Hager, of course, gets to tell them how much money they have to spend, and we'll get into a slide on the budget in just a moment. But session started with the 3 top leaders being as aligned as we've probably ever had, at least at a start. Winter Storm Uri, as Rick noted, did change that. It changed some of the way that the Senate and the House operated, because they had differing points of view. Leadership had different, even amongst the leadership in the Senate, had differing points of view on how to approach that. I would also note that, talking of physical limitations, after we had those limitations at the front end, we lost 3 weeks of functionally at a real critical time when things were starting to open back up as a result of the storm. The storm itself, then figuring out kind of what happened and getting back to business, and then we had very massive hearings to try to determine the response and remedy for that. Next slide, please. Certainly your delegation, although you have some new faces, of course, in your House delegation, your senators are very much a part of the Senate leadership and overall state leadership. Their work, this effort, and what they were asked to carry or to sponsor, and their own interest certainly much demonstrated that. Senator Huffman and Senator Kolkhorst are very much at the top of the leadership in the Senate, and again, their agendas were representative of that. And we'll get to a few more bills about them in here in a minute. Representatives Jatan, Reynolds, Stevenson, and Gates certainly all at various times played very important roles on topics in their committees and in other spots. Your 2 newest members, of course, being freshmen, it does take a little bit more to determine the processes and to kind of form your connections with your colleagues that you're meeting for the first time, but certainly very active members, and I suspect that we will be seeing even more from them in the future. Representative Stevenson continued to be a supporter of the city's initiatives and very helpful with his office throughout session, and certainly he also was very vocal on financial matters related to the state. It's been an area he's been passionate about. Next slide, please. These items in kind of our color system, if you'll look at it, are green are things that passed, and red were emergency items that the governor set forth that either didn't get across the goal line, or in the case of Senate Bill 3, there's probably some continued work that we'll see or review of that topic. Broadband, the state passed HB 5. That bill will set up a commission that will kind of go county by county to look at remedying areas that don't have basic internet and broadband service available. It will also set up mechanisms for the expected federal money and other dollars that are going to come about that have already either been set aside for educational purposes or just for straight deployment of broadband to hit areas that are lacking in that regard. We'll spend a little more time on the public safety, the so-called defund police bills. Those bills, I guess the number one thing for council to know is neither of those bills apply to you all. Senate Bill 23 applies only to counties and the 5 most populous counties. HB 1900 applies only to the top 11 cities, beginning basically at Lubbock at 250,000 and up. And so the provisions of those particular bills, and we'll have a little more discussion about them because of Senator Huffman was the author and sponsor of both of those pieces of legislation. Bail reform was an item that was very important to a number of members and highly talked about, especially going into session. It was deemed an emergency item. That bill did not get across the goal line. It was somewhat caught up in the shutdowns, if you will, due to legislative actions and fight over the election bill, and ultimately the Democratic members of the House breaking caucus and preventing some of these items that were from moving forward. Which leads us well into the next bill, which was at the front of the discussion, the election integrity bill, as it's labeled by its supporters. It was a major item at the end of session, and of course made national news when a group of Democrats broke. Just a little aside on that in Texas history, that's only occurred 4 times in the history of our state. And the last time was with regards to mid-decade redistricting, and a group of Democrats went to Ardmore, Oklahoma at that time. So there was a lot of discussion about that. This item will be an item that will be discussed in future special sessions. It's certainly a national item that garnered a great deal of attention. I said in my time in doing this is the only time that I've seen a sitting president put a press release out about a pending bill before the Texas House, which occurred on this item. The liability protections passed. That was a big business priority bill that some of the big trade groups had promoted, passed. The ERCOT reform bill, which is the primary thing, it does a large number. We could spend whole hours on the electric items alone. But it made changes to the structure of the governance board, requires most notably all members to be from Texas, and put some other safeguards, if you will, in place. Issues related to billing and correcting the pricing of that event. Ultimately, the full package of that did not pass. There is a bill that passed. It's known as securitization bill, HB 4492. We don't know for sure. The governor hasn't signed that bill yet. He has until June 20th to make his decision on all of the bills, and we'll see if he chooses to allow that one either to become law or to ultimately veto it. SB 3 was the main electric reform bill, and it did pass. Chairman, which there's some news there too, Chairman Charles Schwartner was the author of that. He recently, due to some changes, Senator Dawn Buckingham announced she was going to be running for land commissioner, which opened up a seat, a chairmanship in the Texas Senate. There was a reshuffling that occurred, and Charles Schwartner, the author of Senate Bill 3, was made the Business and Commerce chair, and Kelly Hancock, the current chairman, was moved to the Veteran and Border Affairs Committee as part of that shuffle. So next slide, please. I'm not going to go, we have some of this as background material, and I'm not going to go through, obviously, all 50 of the speakers and the lieutenant governor's bill items, but it gives you a good flair for or taste of what the topics were that kind of drove the overall agenda. Some of these that you see that did not pass either passed in other forms, in other bills. For example, HB 1, the state budget, it was passed in the form of SB 1, of course. Next session, it'll be a House bill's turn. So the way that works in following it, they trade that off every year, and then right below that, HB 2, you see is the supplemental. So next time around, SB 2 will be the supplemental state budget. HB 1 will be the budget. Next slide, please. We can go to the next slide. On the lieutenant governor's priority issues, they will match up a lot with what, like I said, the top 3 state leaders had great agreement amongst kind of what the core issues were going into session. The winter storm changed that and required that electric issues and the pricing of the electric market take center stage, and it very much did. But a number of these, again, passed Of course, some of them we opposed. SB 10, we will talk about a little bit later, would have restricted cities and counties' abilities to advocate at the Capitol. And we expect we'll get a chance to have that discussion potentially in special sessions. Next slide. We can go ahead and go to the next. Right upon the conclusion of session, there was some, after the walkout in Senate Bill 7 did not pass, and a number of other items, some of them hot-button political items dealing with transgender issues, critical race theory terms, and different things that did not pass. Some of these bills, bail reform being a major bill that did not pass, a governor emergency item. There was some call for an immediate special session. At that time, the governor made a statement that he would make that determination as to when. It wouldn't be like, and this was the lieutenant governor calling for the special sessions and naming a couple of items that he would like to see on the call. The governor responded back with he would make that determination in his own time, and he was the only one that could do it, and ultimately noted too that there would be a fall special session due to congressional redistricting. We can tell you that with some level of certainty that is likely for a mid-September special session on redistricting, and he kind of indicated we would have time to do that. Due to some of the items that have been happening over the last month and the need and the pressure and some of the national events with regards to certain issues like border security and other needs to expend these federal stimulus funds and relief funds, which the legislature put a requirement in that the governor has to seek some level of their approval. It's not a full appropriations act, but they have had the opportunity to expend these funds or appropriate these funds before the governor could make certain administrative decisions the way that he was able to during the course of the pandemic with our CARES Act funds. So because of all that, there is now an increased talk that we could see a post-July 4th special session to deal with some of these other items. Particularly, I think that we could see issues related to bail reform, and to border security and the needs. The governor came out and noted that he planned on the state of Texas to take over the funding of certain aspects of the border wall project in Texas. That made a lot of national news. In order to appropriate money, for the most part, you would need involvement, and so you would likely need to call the legislature back to do that. But the issue of Senate Bill 7 or the election bill would also very much be an item that would be most likely on that call. And so with those items, it would be I would think a very eventful special session, to say the least, if that is called. And then lastly, as we mentioned, we're told that we should get our census numbers for the state of Texas in a form that they can utilize for drawing legislative maps by the last week of August. In order to load that into the computer system that they use, they'd need a little bit of time. Once that occurred, that would put us around September 15th. Legislative leaders in this area are advising us to count on potentially two, one to handle congressional redistricting, one to handle state legislative and judicial redistricting. And of course, the state side, if they fail to pass a map, goes to the Legislative Redistricting Board. Congressional, they have to keep trying. Ultimately, though, all of these will be in court, as y'all are well aware of. So next slide, please. The budget was one that actually ended up being a lot less eventful than certainly what the lead up to session in the situation that our economy was in with regards to the shutdowns during the COVID response. We had a projected $4.6 billion biennium deficit by the comptroller going in to session. Not on this slide, another major wrinkle, the number one expenditure of our state budget is the health component, spending. And of course, Texas was hit with an unexpected wrinkle to that when the Biden administration rescinded the Section 1115 waiver that Texas had had for a number of years with regards to Medicaid funding. That change, though, was able to be addressed in the session. There were some items that were moved around in anticipation of it. Ultimately, they got a budget that was pretty widely supported across the board. Everybody in the Senate voted for it, for example, which was a surprise to many. But the budget got done with relative ease with what was faced and without a lot of the draconian cuts that were being talked about at the front end. Now, one thing that helped with that was a whole lot of federal money, too, that was put into it through the CARES Act, through different means that allowed for some of the spending to continue at current levels without that need. So all around, through all of it, and an increasing projection, we had the comptroller, I said, has a limited role, but an important role, found $3.12 billion more in his projected revenue estimate for the state at the end of session, which allowed them to finalize the budget. Next item, please. This is a good summary snapshot of the budget. I will say, although cities are not in the state budget to a level that other states have earmarkings for cities, I will say that this budget overall, one, didn't do a lot of harm to cities, which is a good thing, but two, also had some good areas. They did the local parks grant program, some other funding programs. Overall, again, some good within the budget for local governments, and certainly not some of the concerns where we were worried about increased fees on programs that we participate in to fund state agency operations. Next item, please. This gives you a little bit of a feel. We were thinking that we would have a session where we had substantially fewer bills filed because of the limitations the first few months. Ultimately, we had still over 7,000, which is our second all-time highest bill filing in our history, right next to the 2019 session. 90% of those were filed in the last month of bill filing, which ended in March. Cities still, as y'all are well aware, are more affected by the Texas legislature than any other entity in the state, with not a close second. And it's a little bit more trivia. The number one referenced entities in all of our state statutes is cities. Thus, you're the most regulated entity by state statute is city and your operations and those things. So that is one of the reasons, as we talk about our need to be in Austin to advocate, it's because often, as y'all know, the things that you all talk about, the things that your citizens come to you about, the things that your departments have to operate under have a statute at those bases for the most part that say either help you get to a place or present a problem or don't give you the tools or do give you the tools to address them. And that is the key component of why when we say there's 2,200 bills that are impacted, these have a real impact on your citizens and taxpayers, as y'all know. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not going to do a legal review of the bills that passed, but we wanted to talk about a few of the areas that passed. And I will say I'll give a shout to the TML's summary index of bills. If you want a detailed listing of all these bills, that is out, and it does it by subject matter, and it came out this week, and we're part of helping produce that. It's a very good document. But these areas, as Rick said, pandemic response, there was a ton of bills filed, especially initially with regards to it. These were some of the key items that passed. There was prohibition on being able to close or order a place of worship during even a declared disaster. Early on, also HB 1500 that passed would prevent the closure of a place that sells firearms or ammunition during the course of a disaster. And this was stated as they passed it in response to orders that did that during the course of the pandemic. So the next slide, please. HB 1869 was probably one of the highest profile bills and most worked on bills of session from a local government standpoint. In its initial version, and I should note that as we're saying, this is real time, this bill was signed into law today by the governor at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So these are still under review, but ultimately as filed, this bill would have had severe limitations and almost outright prohibition on your use of certificates of obligation for issuance of debt that weren't voter approved. After a great deal of activity, and although my business partner Brandon Agamelian is not here today, he does a lot of work obviously with your city, and I would be remiss if I didn't say he did some great work with our local government partners to get the bill into a shape that has a list of designated items now that it's real clear as to what you can and can't use and what they had a problem with. And so for the most part, I think the bulk of how our clients utilize this have been addressed so that you can still continue to. Again, not to say that it is in perfect shape, but certainly a bill that went from somewhat of a direct bar on the use, and our private sector partners helped us with this bill and helped the legislature move its thinking on this bill as well. But it's an important one to keep an eye on as it gets implemented. Next slide, please. We mentioned the public safety, the defund the police bills, and Rick Ramirez and your city and the mayor and the city as a whole really did a great service for all of local government in working with Senator Huffman when Senate Bill 23 was filed. There were, as Rick said, one of our goals, we see our role in the legislative process is to be information givers, educators at times, because many of these individuals have not served either on a council. And even if you have served on the council, as you know, y'all have staff briefings from your department heads that explain to you all how these various departments and processes work. And that's really often what our role is. When we say we're advocating, that's really often what we're doing. And we're trying to apply that with what's been proposed. And so in doing so, Rick and the city and the mayor were able to highlight to Senator Huffman and her staff that some of the items, at least in Senate Bill 23, and as filed, it did apply to y'all. This bill would have initially applied to you. To work on aspects of that so that we didn't have unintended consequences and do that in a way. And I think it was a real model as to how we can work on issues that are sometimes sensitive, but yet move them to a better place. And at the end of the day, Senator Huffman thanked the city for making her bill much better, and so did her staff. And I think it is a model for how we have to deal with some of the issues that are sometimes real challenging. And again, ultimately, both of these bills, and I would note, I would compare and contrast that to the representative that filed HB 1900, the bill that applies to cities now, did not exercise that same level of commitment to working across the board. And it ultimately, in my opinion, I think most people that would review it, the work product of HB 1900 wasn't as good because of that. It's still a bill, again, that doesn't apply to y'all, but in comparison to the work that was put into Senate Bill 23 and the way that it was improved, I think that's the model of how we can do it. So next item, please. Additional items that were passed with regards to this were HB 9 was priority of the speaker. This prevents the blocking of an emergency vehicle, also deals with and was amended to address blocking of roadways during the course of a protest and increase the penalties for that. The use of laser pointers and fireworks to harm or obstruct law enforcement officers was increased, enhanced criminal penalties as well. Next slide, please. ETJ agreements and land development as a whole is one area that I would say in the last 2 weeks of session we had to probably fight a dozen bad proposals that would have limited or somehow at times carved out the ability for individuals to take themselves out of your ETJ or a city's ETJ or affected your ability to provide water or wastewater services in certain regards, affect development agreements across the board. This particular bill at one time had provisions in it that were extremely detrimental to cities in the way that we've conducted our land use issues in the ETJ for the last 20 years, and would have basically handed that over to the individual to make certain decisions about their property without regard from the cities or counties in it. This bill, ultimately those provisions were moved in the final hours of session, literally. But the topic itself is one that I would highlight for you that I do think is going to come back. It really stems from the annexation law changes that were made back in 2017 and 19, and then it's kind of an extension of that. But it is a very big topic that I think maybe with a normal interim, we may be able to spend a little more time and have a little better discussion on this item. Next bill, please. Building materials bill, we were hopeful going into session that we were going to see changes to this very talked about bill, which was the building materials bill from last session, 2439. Unfortunately, I think due to the pandemic and due to the winter storm, that really didn't occur. And so the only thing that happened was that the authors of the bill originally were able to exempt several communities in their district from the application of the bill that they had passed. And so next bill, please. Under the heading of one of the better bills, I think from a local government perspective, that corrected again some of the issues that have been raised due to the annexation law changes, Senate Bill 374 by Senator Seliger and Representative Shine passed, that's dealing with annexing across roadways and kind of some prohibitions that TxDOT had that had prevented local governments that have state highways within their boundaries from being able to, or in their ETJ, from making annexation determinations. Next slide, please. Another good bill that passed for cities was allowing kind of a modernization. This was a comptroller recommendation to move cloud computing and IT services that to be able to treat them as purposes of public, as personal property as part of the Public Property Finance Act, and to be able to issue certain debt and carry that in different ways with regards to cloud storage. Next item. This is some of the items that some we may see again, but certainly it is what didn't pass gives us a good indication of some of the areas that we know are continued hot buttons. Next slide, please. HB 3 was a significant bill that did not pass. It was the main bill dealing with, and certainly it tried to define the role of the governor in the pandemic and limit, it would have limited his powers pretty significantly, and state agencies. I will say in most of its versions, and again it didn't pass and there were many versions of this bill, it would have severely, if not outright, taken local governments out of the discussion other than taking orders from the state in regards to a declared pandemic. There was a great deal of discussion about how that interacted with your local law enforcement and with emergency first responders. I will say that wasn't fully finished since the bill itself didn't finish. Most of the focus on the bill at the time, again, was that tension that you all witnessed and heard about between the legislature and the governor and his exercise of his executive authority versus what they deemed to be their role. But this item potentially could come back, although I will say that it seems to, by the end of session, it had waned from the very top of mind to them. Next slide, please. Probably the most, not probably, the most talked about bill with regards to local governments is again the Senate Bill 10. This bill in particular would have prohibited cities and counties. And I think that's important to note that although this has been talked about in a way that is supposed to be about protecting the public funds, it doesn't apply to taxing entities other than cities and counties. And at the time, it really in the House still does not have enough support to pass an outright ban. And so because of that, what we saw was a moving, if we look to a bill that the city supported in Senate Bill 1879, right below it, is moved to a discussion of transparency and making sure that the public is aware of what is being expended, what the role is, what is being done. And when that is done, in our experience, it is usually a pretty favorable reaction when the facts are out about it. But this topic, the bill itself, did not pass. It died on the House calendar late in session after the House sponsor, Chairman Chris Patty, who is a former mayor, I might note, pulled the bill down and delayed it past session because of some of the supporters that wanted to vote on an outright ban refusal to withdraw their amendments on his bill to that regard. And so he ultimately killed his own bill. There will be significant calls to hear about this in a special session or to see the governor to bring it back. I will note that this session, unlike the session before on this topic, business was much more vocal. Business groups around the state were much more vocal in regards to opposing this measure. And other groups outside of just cities and counties, education, community colleges, neighborhood groups, a wide variety. In fact, there was a coalition called the Community Advocates of Texas that formed around this topic and really, I think, had a pretty big impact in the discussion behind it. So next bill, please. Again, we've covered election items pretty thoroughly. This will be a main agenda item on all future special sessions, regardless of when they're called, most likely. Next item. This is a topic that has been around for a number of years with regards to cities. During the course of my 20-plus years of working with cities, it's kind of been there. I will say that it is picked up in its pace. The discussion, I was expecting that we would likely see amendments to Senate Bill 7 as it was on the floor that might attempt to do this, to have partisan affiliation for city and county or local offices, cities in particular. There's also been attempts, this kind of goes hand in hand with a discussion to require all local elections to be held in November. And so I expect that will at least be a part of the continued debate. Next item. Again, land development and land use issues, always a hot topic and always one that we have plenty of discussion. Unfortunately, I will say that it has been a difficult area for us. We did not have a favorable committee. The lack of ability to kind of have broad cross sections of cities there. I think this was a real hard session for us on land use. We avoided, I think, some of the worst proposals that we've seen. We did go backwards, in my opinion, on authority that we had at the local level in this regard. But the good news, and this 47 is an extension of the shot clock legislation. And we had attempted many times to make beneficial amendments to that, unfortunately weren't successful. These issues will be back, but most likely not until the regular session. These aren't the type of things, I think, that will make the list, if you will, for a special. Next item. Again, we have some bills here that did not pass. This is one, and we highlighted it because although it was one that one of your delegation members filed and the city had issues with, it was a good example of Rick and the city department being able to sit down with the representative. And although this bill didn't pass, he did make beneficial changes to it that would have addressed a number of the city's concerns. And I think that's something that is important to know when you do have something with your delegation members. So next item. Chapter 313, which is the school property tax abatement system. And this was a pretty big news item. This has been around since 2001 in its original passage, and it's been extended several times. This bill was originally passed to bring the Toyota manufacturing facility to Texas. It ultimately has been used for a wide variety of large industrial and wind energy in particular projects. The bill, and somewhat surprising, if not revived in a special session, that this program, this economic development program, will expire in September of this year. I have already seen calls, or are calls from members of the legislature to add this calls to the special session call, and some major business trade groups that are also pushing for that. So whether it's in a summer special or a fall, I very well could see this item definitely being revived and discussed. Next item. Again, just some other bills and an example that cities are in more committees and have more topics than we would have time to go through today in your agendas. So next item, please. And with that, I think I will hand it over to Rick. And again, I want to say thank y'all for your time and energy.
Thank you, Snapper.
And thank you for hanging in there with us. So just one more bill before we open it up for questions. Senate Bill 1117 was a bill by Senator Colcourse and Representative Gates. It had to do with the Fort Bend Subsidence District. The original bill would have added just one Fulshear representative. The authors were going to add an at-large representative. At first, it was going to be appointed by the county, but we did speak with the members and inform them that it is the cities that have GRPs, groundwater reduction programs, were the main water users within Fort Bend County, so they thought that made a lot of sense, and they made the change for us. So now cities have one additional at-large representative on the Fort Bend Subsidence District, and that helps us out greatly. With that, we'll go to the next slide. We are available to take any questions. So,
questions? Anybody? Carol?
Thank you, Mayor. So Snapper, you mentioned that election integrity will probably be back during special session. Is there anything to, I guess, prevent more walkouts during a special session when that comes back?
I guess I would start with one. It is a pretty unique event when a quorum break occurs, and the governor and the speaker. I mean, under the rules, the reason that in the past that you'd have to go out of state, as was done when the Democrats went to Ardmore, the governor and the speaker actually issued an order, and DPS goes and rounds up members of the legislature and brings them to the Capitol. They don't take them to the jail, they bring them to the Capitol. So that would be one thing if they were not here, and that would likely be done, I think, if there wasn't a quorum and it was known that it was an organized effort to not have a quorum. However, from a policy standpoint, I think you can already see that the governor is doing certain things to maybe. One thing I didn't mention, because it is pure speculation, although it's something that the governor has stated, that he may veto, or he has line item veto authority, and that there was a potential for him to line item veto Article 10 of the state budget, which is the legislative branch operating budget. Which would require them, although the members would be paid because that's constitutionally set, their staffs and office operations would need to have that funded ultimately. So that was one thing. The expenditure of federal funds and those $16 billion that I mentioned that we still have and any future funds, that's something that is a pretty big draw to all members of both parties, but certainly the Democrats as well. And then a few other items that we have heard or could be discussed as potential trades in ensuring some compromise. Those could be items dealing with criminal justice matters. I could even see something potentially on health care or on Medicaid expansion, maybe some limited version or some area there. There are policy things and issues that can be teed up to help ensure that all members will be there. And I think that there will be some thought given to that, too.
Okay, great, thank you. And also you mentioned SB 6, the liability protection for COVID-19 related lawsuits. Could you just talk about it another couple sentences?
Yeah, absolutely. And it didn't change. Oh, well, some of the minutia of it changed, but it is primarily aimed at protecting for when you're open in the course of a pandemic, if you don't have gross negligence and you're following basic guidelines, you're not going to be able to get hit with a lot of lawsuits. I mean, it's in its simplest form, that is, it goes into a lot of different details on how to do that, but it sets out standards by which businesses will be deemed to be operating reasonable, and if you do so, then it will prevent liability in those cases.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Suzanne?
Thank you. Do you think 2439 is dead and it's not coming back? I know it's not probably in special session, but...
The building materials
right.
bill? Well, 2439 passed.
Right.
We wanted attempts to amend that particular legislation to address what we deem as local governments to be some of it, and unfortunately that, as I mentioned, did not, despite attempts with the Texas Association of Builders and other vendors that were associated with passing that bill. TML took a pretty active role. A lot of your colleague cities around the state engaged. We happen to represent several cities in the authors district, Senator Buckingham, who's now running for land commissioner, she announced, by the way. So we think that next session, most likely that topic could come back, and I think it will benefit from as I deem it, normal interim, where we can have normal trade group meetings and outreach to maybe put together some proposals to take to the legislature in advance. But I'm very doubtful that topic would be addressed in a special.
Right. And then, my second question, you didn't mention anything about the immunity bill, the police officers bill, I think that Ron Reynolds filed.
The establishing
immunity
removal, it did not advance. Basically, none of the longer criminal justice proposals in line with that really didn't get off first base.
Okay, thank you.
William?
Thank you, Mayor. Sir, thank you for all your work that you're doing on everyone's behalf. Right now, the conversation is ERCOT, and you guys, you touched on that briefly about some of it, some of the reviews, some of the intentions passed, some didn't. How are we better protected? How is our grid better protected after all of that session is over? Are we in a better place or in a worse place? Where are we at as citizens of Texas?
Well, if certainly asking today, we need to get more generation in Texas. Right. And my business partner, Kurt Seidlitz, is the former chairman of the House State Affairs Committee and authored a bunch of electric utility legislation and has been in that space for a long time. And we were very actively engaged in all this. We represent 6 municipally owned electric utilities. And there is definitely, we have the beginnings of improvement, certainly some big bills in Senate Bill 3, and again, the securitization bill, which we're hopeful the governor will sign, it deals with sets aside currently $800 million from the state's rainy day fund to help levelize out some of the defaults in ERCOT over time. The issue of fixing our grid and what we're experiencing now will ultimately, in my opinion, not be addressed until we incentivize the market to build new generation. That's the core issue. It was the core issue with our winter storm, too. At that storm, we were expected to have over 82,000 megawatts power usage, which would have been by far and away our record. Today, I think our capacity is at 69 megawatts. So, but with regards to the hardening of our system, and again, all of these will take some time because they'll all now start. The PUC, the Public Utility Commission, has rulemakings that have opened. They have new leadership there. We're still waiting. We're down a commissioner. The governor still has to make one appointment there. And we have all brand new ERCOT members for the most part, and there's some requirements there. Can I say that all of those things have been implemented and we're fixed? I think the experience of what we're seeing right now is, well, no, but we're on a path towards making those improvements. I do think that significant, I think there'll be especially in light of what we're seeing now, a potential that we will either in the fall special session or even as early as this summer have electric issues back on the table. The Lieutenant Governor in particular was a big advocate of doing what was known as repricing the last 32 hours of our winter storm event, which would deal with some large liabilities that were created on our utilities. And when I say large, billions in dollars. As y'all probably know, it is now officially the most costly event in Texas history. It's our largest insurance and natural disaster event in our history, even outpassing Hurricane Harvey. And so I think it is a work in progress that you will continue to see. And I actually do think that there will be pretty substantial proposals that are put forward to continue on those efforts. But I couldn't tell you that the job is finished.
So if I may follow up real quick, it's about the same subject. The social media is obviously, we're just excited about ERCOT and how they're going to be protected through hurricane season and everything that's to come. And so I guess if I could go back to people and say, look, based on what I'm hearing from you, there's still a real strong passion to harden, if I may, harden our system. I believe Texas can do everything best, but the winter storm really put us on our heels. And so I just hope there's still a strong passion to protect the people here. That's all.
Absolutely. And I think that is, I mentioned the repricing and some of the continued efforts. I think it is because I will tell you, I've been working in the utility space my whole career. Typically, my neighbors don't know what ERCOT is or was. They all know. Their second grader knows what ERCOT is now, literally. And I think there's such a greater awareness of how this comes about that it'll almost be forced, and especially as we're living through some of it. But ultimately, to fix the systemic issues, and it's not a surprise. I mean, I said for a decade we've held interim hearings that addressed what is known as resource adequacy in Texas. How do we incentivize more, because it's not regulated, it's private market to build generation in Texas. And so how do we incentivize that when you build a plant, you might be lowering the price of that commodity on your other plants. And so there was some financial disincentives for a long period of time and some other issues with renewable power and how it's bid into the market that has meant that we haven't built any substantial new generation as our state's population and energy use increased. And that ultimately was where we found ourselves that evening on a very cold night. Most of us in the electric industry looked at it and thought that would occur on a 112-degree day in July.
Well, thank you for all your work.
Yes, thank you, Councilman.
Anyone else? Thank you, Snapper. Thank you. Moving on, item number 6B, review of and discussion on proposed updates to resolution number 1524, City Council Policy and Procedure, Boards, Commissions, and Committees. We've got Thomas Harris, our City Secretary, and Carrie Paxton Lamke, our Community Engagement Manager. Thomas, Carrie.
Good evening, Mayor,
Welcome.
City Council, City Manager. I'd like to provide you a brief background on the current Boards and Commissions policy. The current policy was adopted September 15th, 2015, and it is a council policy. It establishes appointment guidelines, member recognition, orientation, and training for Boards and Commissions members. It applies to resident volunteer boards, commissions, and staff liaisons. Next slide, please. And to provide you some policy history, recruitment was done through ads in local newspapers. Applications, resumes, and questionnaires were received from applicants. There was an active review of qualified applicants by City Council. Special City Council meetings were convened to interview applicants when needed, and appointments were made 30 days prior to the term beginning. Next slide, please. Community engagement facilitated the Boards and Commissions program from 2018 through 2020, And policy practices that community engagement facilitated included continuing the recruitment ads in papers for new applicants to fill those vacancies, the use of the city social media platforms to market and advertise openings for boards and commissions, as well as reviewing of qualified applicants were carried out by a new council committee. And a council continues to make appointments during regular meetings. I'm going to hand this off to Thomas to address the policy revisions.
Thank you, Carrie. Thomas?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Next slide. Oh, we're already on there. So some of the proposed revisions that we'd like to do is for Council to kind of update. As Carrie mentioned, the policy was indoctrinated back in 2015. Has switched hands with departments several times. So there's some current practices that have come into play that we would like to update the policy with, of course, with your guidance and recommendation. Of course, the continued use of the current recruiting practices, using social media, using the newspapers, doing the e-newsletters and things of that nature. One of the things that we'd like to do for the committee members and the board members is to standardize the practice of the appreciation gifts. Usually it has transitioned year over year to be a different thing, and trust me, I have a stockpile of unused gifts in my office, so we'd like to standardize the practice. This year, I think we're utilizing the Skeeters baseball tickets to kind of standardize a yearly practice for board and commission gifts. One of the things that we found that tend to work a lot better in expediting the process of not only application review, but also the appointment process was the use of a council subcommittee. 3 members were appointed to a task force that reviewed all the applications and made all the vetting and did the recommendations to council. So we'd like to propose that as a revision to your current policy. And then continue with the distribution of the application packets electronically. When I first started here, it was done through thick binders. Now, I believe you guys get it all electronically, so we'd like to indoctrinate that into the policy. Next slide, please. The other part that we wanted to recommend to you all is more involvement from the staff liaisons. They getting more involved in the training, in the development, and the orientation, and in particular the record keeping of what goes on with the boards and commission members. We've created a SharePoint site in which all this information can be exchanged with staff, and then, of course, getting them directly involved in feedback to you. So you can kind of get a report card directly from those that get involved with the board members, how things are going during meetings, so on and so forth, and keep that cycle of communication going throughout the whole process of the board members' terms. The other thing that we like to, again, is limit the use of the special city council meetings. Again, the subcommittee seemed to be more time conducive. So that way council can stay on track to making the regular appointments during the regular council meetings and not have to schedule so many special city council meetings. The other thing that we're recommending, where applicable, because some of the boards are governed by state law and other statutes, but where applicable, update the term limits to be those that are now mimicked of the new charter requirements for council members as well. Excuse me. The other thing that we would like to recommend is to beef up the attendance requirement. Initially, the attendance requirement was if you missed 3 meetings, you were automatically resignation, but now we'd like to add a number requirement to it. The suggested number is 50% or more, but again, that is up to council and what you guys would like to recommend. The only exclusion would be for the Building Standards Commission. The reason being they only meet as needed, and to date, they've only had 1 meeting over the last year. Next slide, please. Now, in the attendance requirement, of course, just like with everything else, things come up, so we would like to recommend an excused absence clause, if you will. So that way, if a family emergency pops up for a board and commission member, or unexpected illness, or some type of business conflict, which a lot of the members are members of the business community, again, just provided that they would email the chair and the staff liaison, and the chair make a recommendation as to whether or not that absence is excused. One thing that we recommend and that we found is that the committees and task force tend to be governed by a a special resolution that is done by the council. So they are usually created outside of the normal process where there's statutory requirements with ordinances or state law or things of that nature. So we carved it out to create its own category. Because usually these boards, once they're done with their specific purpose, they're dissolved, or they get evolved into a permanent board and commission. So a good example of this would be the Independence Ethics Review Board. Was once a special task force and is now a permanent board. The other recommendation that we'd like, so we don't have to keep coming back and forth to council, is that as these boards and commissions are newly formed, after the policy is updated, that they would automatically be subject to this particular policy, and we don't have to keep coming back and forth to council to get the policy updated. Next slide, please. So with that, I want to, before we get to some clarifying questions, I want to give some thank yous to the people that you see on this slide. Carrie was very, very instrumental in educating me on the process. Paulina was very helpful to get a lot of the rewrites. So that big red line version you see in your packet, that you see Paulina Valero's name in there, and Natalie assisting me as well. Want to also give a shout out to the staff liaisons for their help on this. We met with them via Zoom calls, team meetings, one-on-ones to make sure that everything was in there and correct and ready for you guys to review and make some recommendations. So with that, next slide, please. Carrie and I would like to obtain some of your feedback and finalize this policy and bring it back for consideration and adoption at a meeting later on in July. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any clarifying questions that you may have.
Thomas, to facilitate the discussion, I'm going to ask you to go back to the first slide on the recommendations, and then I'm going to take a slide at a time, and I'm going to get the council's reaction, recommendations, et cetera, to each slide.
Okay, so if we could go back
Otherwise, we could be all over the place.
Yes, sir, I understand. So if we go back to the first slide on the proposed revisions.
So, council members, on the four items that you see on the proposed revision, any input? You like it, you don't like it, Carol?
Yeah, Thomas, besides Planning and Zoning Commission, which boards and commissions can be handled under closed executive session?
Those would be ones that tend to have what they call administrative or quasi-judicial rights. So it would be, like you mentioned, P&Z, Planning and Zoning, BSC, some of the other boards included.
Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Building standards.
Let's see, going through my list here. Some of your TERS boards would be included, I'm sorry, your tax increment reinvestment zone boards would be included in that as well. The Independent Ethics Review Board, Imperial Redevelopment District, and that about sums it up as the boards you could handle in executive session. Everything else would have to be done in open session.
Okay. I like everything on here, and I like the use of council subcommittee for, so for committees and some of the boards and stuff. And it works really well, particularly on those boards and commissions that can't be handled under closed executive session. I really think that's a very good format and allows a lot quicker turnaround time, because it's really hard to get all 7 hour schedules together sometimes. But I was just, only thought was, I wonder if there would be any benefit to having the full council on something like P&Z maybe, and ZBA, something like that. That was just my thought. I don't know if the other council members think.
Sir.
Thank you. Having served on the last subcommittee, I am completely in favor of 1, 3, and 4 on this. I have no comment on number 2, but I very much would like us to continue and adopt these as our actual policy.
I'd agree.
Okay. So, Thomas, I think you've got this page adopted. Let's go to the next page.
Next slide, please.
Council members, anybody?
Yes, sir.
Suzanne?
I only had a question on the board meeting attendance requirements. I think if you're going to be on board, you need to be there. Would Zoom be an option for people who can't be there, and can we make the requirements more stringent based upon Zoom attendance?
Yes, ma'am. So we currently do hybrid functions with the, similar to council. They have the option to attend virtually or in person. So as far as making the requirement more restrictive, that I leave that up to you all to.
As long as the law allows.
Yes, sir.
As long as the governor
Right.
keeps extending it or doesn't limit it.
Correct.
But it's time, if he decides to limit it, then it goes back to what it's always been.
Right. So if it goes back to the standard law, then a quorum would have to be present at one physical location, and then we'd have to post the location of wherever they're virtually zooming in. But a quorum has to be at one physical location under standard law.
That's my only comment. Thank you.
Anyway,
Yep. Just a question.
Nishad?
Having served on ethics review, is that something that meets regularly now? We did not meet regularly in the past.
Now that it's a permanent board and commission, the Independent Ethics Review Board, I believe it's a quarterly meeting is what they're shooting for now. In fact, they just had a meeting last week.
Perfect, thank you.
Everybody good with this slide? Next slide, Thomas.
Something on this one would be for the excused absent provision, provided that they notify the chair and the staff liaison, carving out the committees and task force to be separate. And then under that section, we've only made, where applicable, certain policy provisions would apply to those committees and task force. And then any board that's formed after the adoption of the updated policy would automatically be subject to the policy.
And so what we're really saying is for those that are required by law, there's no action necessary. For those that we do, like a city manager's task force or a council task force, then we set forth the criteria under which we were creating it, the purpose, the mission, whatever it happened to be, and we'd have a specific ordinance related to that particular activity.
Correct, and they would be subject to that particular.
I understand. Okay, I'm fine with this. Okay?
Next slide. I believe this is the last one, but next slide just in case. Yeah, that's it.
You're good to go. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Item number 7, City Council City Manager reports. 7A, City Council Member reports. Jennifer, let's start with you.
I attended Behind the Badge Charities function with several other council members a couple of weekends ago. It was a huge success. We had a huge turnout. I believe it was sold out and turned out to be a very successful event. So proud to be there to support our law enforcement.
Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor. Along with you and council members Watley and Kermali, I attended the Greater Houston Builders Association luncheon, and I also attended the Chimney Stone HOA meeting, and you were there too, and you were a big hit.
William.
Thank you, Mayor. Along with all the fun social events I did, I have to do a shout out to our fire department. They ran a fire call in Terra, which is outside of Greatwood, this weekend, and it was a challenging fire. They had help from Pecan Grove and Richmond and others to extinguish a fire. 3 firefighters were slightly injured in the fire, and I don't want us to ever forget how awesome they are. One of our businesses in the area brought her snow cone machine to the fire site and served snow cones to all the firefighters and the family. And one of the firefighters walked over to me and he said, "I think I need the sugar after this fire." And he sat by a tree and he ate a snow cone, and it was so cool to watch these men and women that we sometimes overlook but appreciate so much.
Thank you, William. Carol.
I was too busy today to even check my calendar to jog my memory. It's all fast.
Suzanne.
Thank you, sir. Along with Councilman Ferguson and yourself, sir, I was at the Sugar Lakes HOA meeting, And again, you took the show, so it was a good time. But I want to talk about our firefighters as well. I was able to go Saturday to the Citizens Fire Academy Fire Burn Day, which is the first time in, I guess, over a year and a half, we got to go out to the burn fields and enjoy the day there. And the Citizens Police Academy also had their graduation here, I think, on the 10th. So our first responders and fire academy all did a great job this last week.
Thank you, Suzanne. Michelle?
Mayor, I attended the HOA meeting for Telfair last week via Zoom, and had the honor and privilege of going to the Blue Legends Swim School in Telfair. They're artistic dancers, formerly called synchronized swimming. That's what I remember them in the Olympics, but it's now called artistic dancing. And these young ladies put on a show for Norman and I was just blown away. These young ladies won silver medal in Mesa, Arizona earlier in the year, and they are probably in Denver right now or tomorrow competing for another medal. So we have some very, very talented young ladies in Sugar Land that go to the Blue Legend Swim School in my district too, and I'm rooting them on to the gold medal.
Thank you, Michelle. I'd like to give a shout out to our staff. Staff's done a great job with the Skeeters. We've had 2 weeks now of them playing ball. We've entertained a multitude of companies and or staff in the suite. We've had great attendance. It's been an absolute pleasure to attend some of those ball games. So for those of you as our citizens that haven't been, you need to go. Prices have been fixed. They're pretty much what they were when we had the independent league, but the difference in the baseball is difference in night and day. So we'd encourage you to get out and attend. And just to highlight for everybody, remember we got 4th of July coming up. It's going to be a big time. Item number B, City Manager Report. Michael.
Well, Mayor, you stole my report, but I'll just try to expand on it. If you haven't been out to the Skeeters, you need to do it. It's a great time. Mayor, also think our Boy Scouts in attendance need some award for sticking out this entire meeting. This may be a record at 7:56, so thank you for being here and being a part of the process. And then this is our last regular meeting before our annual Red, White, and Boom.
Red, White, and Boom.
7 to 10 on July 4th. We have some on-site parking, but you better get there early if you have any hopes of attaining that. We do have shuttles coming from the University of Houston, Sugar Land campus. We're going to have great music, great entertainment, and we're looking for a great time for all of our residents. That's it, Mayor.
Yeah, Michael, to the Boy Scouts, I think you guys are the first ones since I've been on council have made it all the way to the end of the meeting. Most people sneak out after about the first half hour. So congratulations. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Adjourn at 7:55.